Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Let me read to you a thank you note, since it's addressed to you. Dear Assembly of Yahweh, thank you so much for your thoughtful gift. I was so overwhelmed to receive your generosity. It made me feel so special that you would think of me. I know that Zachary and Joshua enjoyed their time with you immensely, and I wish I could have been there to meet you all. Blessings in Yeshua, Jamie Bauer. So we did get that in the mail last week. Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
I'll turn to Deuteronomy 6. If anybody, while we're teaching, checks the score of the Alabama football game, may the fleas of 1,000 camels infest your armpits. So. I feel like we're safe.
I thought you wanted us to stomp.
No, don't tell me. Oh, me, I wasn't asking for information. That's true. Deuteronomy 6. Several weeks ago, I told you that after the 3 fall Moedim, the 3 feasts, we were going to start a study in which we were going to examine the 613 laws listed in Torah. So I want you to do this for me. If you're open to Deuteronomy 6, I'm going to read this text. And I want you to read along with me. I want you to look at it with your eyes. And I want you to count for yourself and tell me how many laws are listed in the 9 verses that I'm going to read. I want everybody to participate. I want you to come up with your own count. I don't want you to shout it out. But I do want you to either make a mental note of how many you see, or I want you to jot it down so that you know. Are you ready? You there?
Yes, sir.
Deuteronomy 9, verse 1. Deuteronomy 6, verse 1. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which Yahweh your Elohim commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you go to possess it, that you might fear Yahweh your Elohim, to keep all His statutes and His commandments, which I command you, you and your son and your son's son, all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has promised you, in the land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim is one, Yahweh. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart. And you shall teach them diligently unto your children. And you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the post of your house and on your gates. How many did you come up with? Go ahead and tell me now. Did anybody count?
I got 9.
You got 9. Anybody else come up with a different number? 7. Anybody else come up with a different number? You did what now?
Over 20.
Over 20, okay. Everybody else afraid to say? You agree with them? All right. Let's go through these verses one by one and look at it then. Were there any in verse 1? Did anybody see some in verse 1? I imagine you did, Bob, if you came up with 20. Anybody see any commandments in verse 1? You did? Tell me what it is.
I thought we were looking for Torah, but you said the word commandments just then. There's the word commandment. This is the commandment. And these are the statutes and judgments. Those are the first 3 that I got.
I said commandments. We're looking at, thank you, I need to clarify. We're looking for laws. We're told there's 613 laws. So do you see a law there? What about in verse 2? You see any in that?
Yes.
Yes.
What is it?
Fear Yahweh your Elohim.
Okay. Is that a commandment? I'm going to ask you a question. Is that a commandment, or is it simply the statement of a fact? Is he saying, if you tie it to verse 1, is he saying, I'm going to teach you his commandments so that you might fear him? Is he just stating a fact? This is what I'm about to do. Or is it a law saying you have to fear Yahweh? See? Fear Yahweh so you can keep. What about verse 3? Making you nervous? What about verse 4?
Yahweh is one.
Okay, Yahweh is one, so is that a commandment? Is that a law? Is that information? Is there a difference between information and a law?
Seems like it's a statement instead of a
Statement. Do what, Stephanie?
So it seems like a declaration instead of a law.
Okay, a declaration giving information, or a law. We'll come back and we'll talk about that one later. In verse 5. All right. Here's my question to you then. Everybody agree that that's a law? A command. That's what I mean by law, a command. You shall love Yahweh. All right. Now my question to you is this one commandment? Is it 3 or is it 4? You shall love Yahweh. You shall love Yahweh with all of your mind. You shall love Yahweh with all of your heart. You shall love Yahweh with all your might. Are they separate, or does it all make just one command? Verse 6. Any in verse 6?
Keep His words in your heart.
All right. Verse 7.
Teach diligently.
Is it 1, is it 2, or is there 5? You see how we can make that distinction? All right, look in verse 8. Is that one law, or is it 2? Or is there more? At least 2. All right, in verse 9. You shall write them. Is that one law, or is it 2 laws? Here, I want you to write them on the post of your house, and I want you to write them on your gates. Is that 2 separate laws, or is that just one law? 2. See, somebody said 2, somebody said 1. Right. I heard somebody say that there are 613 laws. So I repeated it. I read somewhere that there are 613 laws. So I repeated that. So if we're going to do this study, the first thing we have to realize is that a man said there are 613 laws. Yeah. A man said that. Right. Granted, he was a man who spent a lot of time studying Torah. A lot of time studying Torah. And he was considered to be one of the most respected Torah scholars in his day and beyond, even to our day. He's considered to be one of the most respected Torah scholars ever. But the fact still remains that he is a man and that he's the one that started this enumeration of the laws. There's nowhere in Torah you're going to find the list. You can go to Leviticus 23 and you can find the list of the appointed times of Yahweh. You know that?
Yes.
How many of them are there? Say what? 7 or 8. Exactly. So we generally refer to the 7 Moedim as the appointed time, but when you look in Leviticus 23, it actually lists 8 beginning with the Sabbath. So you got Sabbath, you got Passover, you got unleavened bread, you got first fruits, you got Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, known by several different names. Then you've got Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. So you've got those 8 listed in Leviticus 23. You can go to Exodus 20 and find the list of the 10 commandments that were written by the very finger of Yahweh on tablets of stone. Right? But there is nowhere you can turn to and find the list of 613 laws. And there's nowhere in Torah that says there are 613 commandments from Yahweh or there are 613 laws from Yahweh. You're not going to find that anywhere in Torah. A man by the name of, and I'm going to give his name a try here, Moses, I can say that, or Moshe. Moses ben Maimon. Maimon. M-A-I-M-O-N. If you want to look that up later, you may. He was commonly referred to as Maimonides, but more often than not, he was referred to by the acronym Rabam. R-A-M-B-A-M. Rabam. Now, the acronym is taking his title and the initials of his name and putting them together. R-M-B-M. Rabbi Moses ben Maimon. So they stuck 2 A's in there and decided to call him Rabam. Enough about his name. Here's what we need to know about him. He died in the year 1204. During his life, he worked as a rabbi, he worked as a physician, he worked as a philosopher in Morocco and in Egypt. He's known primarily for the book he wrote called Mishnah Torah. They still use it heavily today, Mishnah Torah. I don't want to get bogged down here explaining what that is and how it's like or different from the Talmud. Just suffice it to say that this was a book that he wrote that took him 10 years to compile, and it was written to give a complete record of what is compiled in his interpretation of the oral law. What is the oral law? His book is not a book written on what's written in Torah. It's a book written on the traditions that were handed down because of things that were said.
Right.
Oral law. For our purposes in this study, we need only to know that if you ever hear that there are 613 laws in Torah, it's because Rabam went through Torah and cataloged them by his interpretation. He made a list. He separated them into categories. Categories of one category might be signs, one might be prayer, one might be blessings, one might be the poor, one might be food. One might be how to deal with Gentiles. One category might be how we relate to Yahweh. So he created categories and he took laws and he began to put them in these categories, and then he enumerated them and he came up with 613. He had 248 positive ones and he came up with 368 negative ones. Now do not take what I'm about to say as negative in any way. Truly I admire the work of this man in his study of Torah. It's impressive to me. But I have looked at his list and my conclusion is this: there may be 613 laws. But there may be 587. There may be 629. It's according to how you look at it and interpret it. We came up with different numbers. Right? I think it's hard to say whether there's 613, 622, 591. What we don't want to do in this study is to focus on the list that Rabam made. What we do want to do is focus on what Yahweh has commanded us to do.
Yes, sir.
Regardless of how many numbers that is. Okay? Now, this is not going to be a study about learning the categories and learning a list that was made over 800 years ago.
Right.
This study is going to be about learning, keeping, and doing the instruction that our Elohim gave to us.
Yes, sir.
All right? If you say there are 12 laws in the first 9 verses of Deuteronomy 6, and someone else says, no, you're counting them wrong, there are 17, does it really matter whether there are 7 or 12 or 19?
Does not matter.
Doesn't matter. Do we really need to spend our time trying to come to an agreement, discussing it until we all agree there's 11 and a half? No. Should we instead spend our time making sure that we understand everything that Yahweh is communicating to us in those 9 verses, and that we're able to walk in agreement with Him on what He said in those 9 verses?
Yes, sir.
That's more important, right?
Right.
In this study, we're not going to ever be able to say, okay, here we are in February and we're on law number 247. That's not going to happen. Besides that, if we were doing it that way, you know that by February we might be on law 3, right?
Right.
If that's what we had in mind, then we need to forsake that thought and instead embrace this thought. We're just going to learn, keep, and do
Yes, sir.
what Yahweh has told us to do. I'm glad that Rambam made the list. I find it encouraging. I find it encouraging that this man who studied Torah came up with 613 laws. That's not many. I'm glad somebody cataloged them.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that after cataloging them, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 laws. Google and try to find out. I did, so you try it. Google and try to find out how many laws there are in Alabama. You can find out anything on Google, right? In this day of computer, you can find out anything.
Except for that.
You won't find that number.
Yeah.
Try to find out how many laws there are just in your county, or how many laws there are in the United States of America. Nobody knows. There's tens of thousands of laws. Now, while I was searching, I did find this statement, and I found it interesting. Listen to this. It is common for residents of major U.S. cities or areas to live under 6 or more layers of special districts, as well as a town or city and a county or township, in addition to federal and state governments. Thus, at any given time, the average American citizen is subject to the rules and regulations of several dozen different agencies at the federal, state, and local levels, depending upon one's current location and behavior. 6 layers of special districts, plus a city, plus a county, plus the state, plus the federal. Listen to it again. Each of us are under the laws of several dozen different agencies. Now that's a lot. 600's not many. That's a lot. There are so many laws that no one actually knows how many there are, and some of them are just dumb. In Alabama, I discovered this. There are still laws on the book that state that it's illegal to wear a fake mustache to church that makes people laugh. That's a law in Alabama. It's illegal to open an umbrella on the street. Yeah, because it might spook a horse.
Yeah.
It is illegal to drive a motor vehicle while blindfolded. Now tell me what had to happen to make them write that law in the books. Were dozens of people doing this? It's a law. It's illegal to flick a booger in the wind. On the ground, not in the wind. It's illegal. You probably know about this. When I was growing up, you were well aware of it. When I speak of blue laws, what do I mean? Does everybody know what we mean by blue laws? You do?
Yeah.
You don't know? When I was a young boy, and even into my teenage years, a lot of blue laws were still being enforced. What were blue laws?
Sunday.
Businesses had to be closed on Sunday. You could not open up on Sunday. But it goes beyond just businesses. Here's what the law says. The law says it's illegal to work on Sunday, play cards on Sunday, shoot a gun on Sunday, hunt on Sunday, or race on Sundays. If you were caught playing canasta on Sunday, you was breaking the law. $500 fine, or up to a year in prison. Those laws are still on the books.
Yeah.
Men make laws all the time. And some of them are not righteous.
Yeah.
Some of them are not logical, not reasonable, or not sensible. But these same people want to scoff that the Creator of the universe gave us 600 instructions for how to live in His creation. 613, if it is, that number's not many. And all of His are righteous. All of them are logical. All of them are reasonable and sensible, and none of them are hard to do.
Right.
It is the lie of the devil when men stand up and tell you they're impossible or hard to do. They're not impossible, and they're not hard to do. Unlike the laws of the land we live in, it's not difficult to discover what these laws are. If we have been ignorant of them, it's because we have chosen to ignore them. If we want to know them, we can. Look in Deuteronomy 30 with me for a moment. You there?
Yes, sir.
Verse 11. For this commandment which I command you this day, it is not hidden from you. Somebody say that with me. It's not hidden.
It's not hidden.
Neither is it far off. Is it a long way away?
No, sir.
That's as plain as it can get, right?
Yeah.
It's not hidden and it's not far off. Verse 12. It is not in heaven that you should say, who shall go up for us into heaven and bring it to us that we may hear it and so do it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it unto us that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very nigh unto you. Where is it? In your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. If it was thought that there was some holy book of instruction and insight concerning man and concerning the universe, and that it was written and hidden in the heavens, men would become spiritual Indiana Joneses trying to find out how to get to it and bring it back.
Right.
If it was thought that a holy book of instruction and insight concerning man and the universe was written and hidden somewhere across the sea, men would become holy Jacques Cousteaus, going in search of this holy book that would tell us how to make the world we live in better.
Right.
But it's not hidden and it's not far off. It's nigh. Now what a word this is. What does it say? The word is nigh. The Hebrew word there is karob. Q-A-R-O-B, karob. The Hebrew root of this word means to approach. Karab means to approach. It means to be at hand. It means to be present. The root of the word means to be ready. I'm not just close to Bill, but I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what this word means. It means to be present, to be ready. The word karob means to be very near as an ally for you. So we can take what's said in Deuteronomy 30 and say it this way. The law of Yahweh approaches us in order to be our ally.
Yes. Wow. Amen.
Karob is a word that is used when it wants to speak of someone who is family. When the Bible says his near kinsman, the word translated near is this word karob. It's his family member. It's somebody that's closely related to him. So this word translated nigh means more than just in the vicinity, more than just in the geographical vicinity of someone. It's not saying that the word of Yahweh is somewhere close and we can find it if we want to. Instead, it's saying that the word of Yahweh is approaching us, ready to help us, wanting to be our ally.
Yes, sir.
It's near to us like family. Let me show you two quick examples of this word karob being used in reference to kinsman. Look in Leviticus 25. I see on Facebook that questions been asked. How many laws does the Baptist church have?
Robert's Rules of Order.
Exactly. There are literally thousands.
Yeah.
Right? And you're expected to keep the laws of a church. Goes back to Mark chapter 7, doesn't it? Which Yeshua said to the Pharisees, you set aside Yahweh's law so that you can keep your own commandments.
Right.
Right? Are you in Leviticus 25?
Yes, sir.
Look here at verse 25 in Leviticus 25. If your brother be waxed poor and has sold away some of his possessions, and if any of his kin, korob, that word translated kin means near, we said, but here it's the Hebrew word korob is translated as kin. If any of his kin come to redeem it, then shall he redeem that which his brother sold. So it's talking about a close family member has the right to buy that possession back from you. How many times is somebody that you know, a grandfather or a great-grandfather or even a dad or brother or somebody that you're kin to, had a family heirloom and they got in a bind and sold it. And you wish they hadn't have done that. Because now it's gone from the family forever. Well, Yahweh understands that's wrong.
Yeah.
So Yahweh said, if you're a close family member, we don't operate in America by the laws of Torah. We should.
Right.
But according to the laws of Torah, if somebody in my family sells something that I consider to be part of the family, I've got a right to go buy it back.
Right.
And they're obligated to sell it back to me. Okay? Isn't that beautiful? But here, I'm getting away from the point. The point is the word korob is translated as kin, somebody that's blood related to you. Look in Numbers 27.
Yes, sir.
All right, Numbers 27 verse 8. You shall speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a man die and have no son, then you shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. And if he have no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance unto his brethren. If he have no brethren, then you shall give his inheritance unto his father's brethren. And if his father have no brethren, then you shall give his inheritance unto his kinsman, that is korob, next. Here the word's translated as next. You shall give his inheritance unto his kinsman that is next to him of his family. He shall possess it, and it shall be unto the children of Israel a statute of judgment as Yahweh commanded Moses. So sometimes this word can refer to just being near geographically, but oftentimes it is clear, particularly in this verse, that the instruction is that if a man doesn't have a son, a daughter, a brother, or an uncle to whom his possession can go, he is to find the nearest of kin to him. It's not talking about somebody that lives close by. The word korob means his nearest of kin. If it's not a brother, if it's not a sister, if it's not a son, if it's not a daughter, if it's not an uncle, he's got somebody that's kin to him somewhere. And the next nearest of kin, whoever that is, gets that inheritance. Okay? Find people kin to him, select the one who is the most kin to him, give him the stuff. So keep that in mind when you go back and read Deuteronomy 34, chapter 30, verse 14. It says the word is korob you. Nigh you. How nigh is it? Listen to what it says. How nigh is korob to you? What's the next phrase say in verse 14? Say it.
In your mouth.
In your mouth and in your heart. What does that mean? That it's in your mouth and in your heart. It means that the word is down on the inside of you. Torah is deep inside of us before we ever read the first line out of Torah. How can that be? How can it be that Torah's inside of us before we ever read it? How is it possible for it to be in my mouth and in my heart before I ever read it? It's possible because we're kin to it.
Right.
Did you know that you and Torah are kinfolk? You have the same father.
Right. Amen. Amen.
The law of Yahweh is our next of kin. We both were born of Yahweh. We both have our origin in Him. If we'll look inside, we'll see that the law we read on the page, if we'll look deep inside, we will see that the law that we read on the page is actually in our very DNA.
Yeah.
That means that deep in our DNA, we want the same things that Yahweh wants.
Yes, sir.
Let's not miss this. This is an important part, an important point if we're going to study some 613 laws. It's in our DNA. Look in Romans chapter 2. Listen to, we have read these verses for years. Even before we knew anything about a Hebrew roots movement or Torah. We read this stuff all of our life. Listen to verse 14. For when the Gentiles, which have not Torah, what does that mean? To whom were the oracles of Yahweh committed to? To the children of Israel, to the Jews. They had the written Torah. The Gentiles never had it. Listen to what Paul said about them. For when the Gentiles which have not Torah do by nature the things contained in Torah, these having not Torah are a law unto themselves. Listen to verse 15. Which show the work of the law written in their hearts. What? They haven't been saved.
Yeah.
They haven't been born again. But yet Paul said they're demonstrating that the Torah that we see written is written in their hearts already. Their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. You can't get any deeper than heart, conscience, and thoughts. Paul said you go find any Gentile in the world, and deep on the inside of him, Torah is there.
Yeah.
And Torah, when he does the right thing, Torah will excuse it and say yes. Right? If he does the wrong thing, Torah will say no. We call that our conscience.
Right.
It's not our conscience, it's the DNA on the inside of us that comes from our Creator.
Right. Amen.
The law of Yahweh, it says in Deuteronomy 30, is nigh. It's our next of kin. It's in our mouth. It's in our heart. It's in our conscience. It's in our thoughts. We were created to do it.
Right.
When we transgress the law, we're not doing what comes naturally. When we keep Torah, we're doing what comes naturally. Keeping the law is only hard if we get deceived. We both came from Yahweh. I want you to think about that for just a moment. Genesis 2 says this, verse 7, and Yahweh, Elohim, formed man out of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. How did man become a living soul?
The breath of Yahweh.
By the very breath of Yahweh. Yahweh breathed us into existence. Listen to this out of 2 Timothy chapter 3. All Scripture is given by inspiration of Yahweh. How did Scripture, Torah, come into existence? Yahweh breathed it into existence. We and Torah came forth out of the breath of Yahweh. We share the exact same DNA. Wow. Both of us come from His breath. Every commandment, He breathed it out. Every man came from His breath. Every command, every man. So Torah is not hard to keep. It's who we are. I used to find it difficult to understand when it said in Deuteronomy 30 verse 14, it's in your mouth and in your heart. It was difficult until I looked that word nigh up. And I saw that this word not only is used to refer to geographical closeness, but it's also used to refer to genetic closeness. And it makes sense. The word of Yahweh and us have the same origin. We both came from His breath. Down on the inside of us is Torah. Are there 613 laws? Are there 587? Are there 629? I don't know. Are there 248 positive, 365 negative? I don't know. Can they be divided into 5 categories, 3 categories, 18 categories, 32 categories? I don't know. It would all be arbitrary anyway if we did it. Right? How many of them are for the priest? How many of them are for the temple? I don't know. But this I do know. As we study them, they will resonate with the very core of who we are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So many people want to read Romans 7. Why don't you turn there? So many people want to read Romans 7 and make a big deal out of the struggle Paul described concerning walking in obedience. Do you remember? Where he said, the good that I want to do, I do not, and the evil that I don't want to do, I do. And he starts describing this great struggle taking place on the inside of him. But listen to what Paul said in Romans 7 and in verse 22. For I delight in the law of Yahweh after the inward man.
Amen.
Say that with me. For I delight in the law of Yahweh after the inward man. Paul understood what Deuteronomy 30:14 was saying. Paul knew that he had the same DNA as Torah has. His inward man delighted in it. When he read it, on the inside of him there was pleasure. There was deep down inside of him, he said yes to what's written in Torah.
Right.
It was his sinful nature that worked in him that he wanted to be free from, not the law of Yahweh.
Right.
It was his sinful nature that needed to be done away with in redemption. It was not the law of Yahweh that needed to be done away with in redemption. And then he said, I delight after the law of Yahweh in my inner man. And then when you read Romans 8, Paul makes it abundantly clear what he's talking about. When we have been remade by faith in Messiah and we walk in the Spirit, Paul says we walk in obedience to the law and we find delight in it. Anyone, he said, who walks in the flesh refuses to subject himself to the laws of Yahweh. He said, so we've been reborn. We've got the Spirit of the Messiah in us. And he said, being reborn, walking in the Spirit, we delight in the law of Yahweh. Our inner man makes a connection. But he said, when you continue to try to walk in the flesh, you don't have His Spirit, you're walking in the flesh, you will not subject yourself to the law of Yahweh. Yeah. That's clear. It's easy to know if you walk in the Spirit or not. Just take the Romans 8 test. Romans 8 verse 3 says this, for what the law could not do in that it was weak through the flesh made it weak. Yahweh sending His own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh and for sin condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. How is the righteousness of the law fulfilled in us? Because when we walk after the Spirit. To be Spirit-filled then, to walk in the Spirit, is to fulfill the righteousness of the law. When I'm fulfilling the righteousness of the law, I'm walking in the Spirit. When I walk in the Spirit, I fulfill the righteousness of the law. Okay? Now look in verse 7. Because the carnal mind is enmity against Yahweh. It is not subject to the law of Yahweh, neither indeed can be. So then, they that are in the flesh cannot please Yahweh. I don't care how many songs they sing. I don't care how many offerings they give. I don't care how many mission trips they take. I don't care how many houses they build. I don't care how loud they get in their praise. I don't care how much they dance. If they are ignoring and breaking Torah, they're in the flesh and not walking in the Spirit.
Right. Right.
How much plainer can it be? I understand that there are some things that Paul wrote that are hard to be understood. But not this.
Yeah.
This is plain. It is the flesh that doesn't want to obey Torah. The spirit of man delights in it and wants to obey it.
Wow.
How much plainer can you get? So if you're reading Torah and you say, no, I don't want to do that, is that the spirit leading you or your flesh
That's the flesh.
mastering you? It's the flesh. Redemption is the work of Yahweh through the Messiah to free us from the bondage of our flesh so that we can reconnect with our near kinsman, which is Torah. So back to Deuteronomy 6, please. I don't want us to close without seeing some of the 613 commandments, if there are 613. I don't want to start a study on the 613 commandments and not talk about a couple of them. Our very DNA, as we look at this, knows that the words that we're about to read are true. Our very DNA delights in them and wants to embrace them. So let's just look quickly at them. I just want to talk about three things and I'll do it quickly. Number one, in Deuteronomy 6, we're told that the origin of Torah is Yahweh. The origin of Torah is not Moses. It was breathed out by Yahweh. Verse 1. Now, these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgment which Yahweh your Elohim commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you go to possess it. So Moses makes it clear, I was commanded to come tell you this.
Yeah.
Yahweh. And listen, these folks knew it to be true because they could hear the voice of Yahweh and they saw His presence on that mountain and His voice terrified them. Right. And they said to Moses, you go up and talk with Him and you come back and tell us what He said. Right. So they knew Yahweh had said it to him, and Moses reiterates it. These are His commandments, His statutes, His judgment, and He commanded me that I tell them to you. All right, so the origin of Torah is what? Is who? It's Yahweh. The second thing we see is the purpose of Torah is to benefit us and our family. That you might fear Yahweh your Elohim, to keep all His statutes and His judgments, which I command you, you and your son and your son's sons, all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has promised you, in the land that flows with milk and honey. If you never learn to fear Yahweh and to walk in His instruction, then you will live under a curse. Your life will be cursed. Your children's life will be cursed. Your children's children's life will be cursed. The greatest things that we can ever do for ourselves and for our children is to learn, keep, and do what's written.
Yes, sir.
So we're told that right here in Deuteronomy 6. We're told what the origin of Torah is, and it's Yahweh. We're told what the benefit of Torah, or the purpose of Torah is to benefit us.
Yes, sir.
Yahweh's not trying to keep something back from us.
Right. He's trying to get something.
Yahweh's not trying to restrict us. He's trying to benefit us.
Yes, sir.
Right? Then thirdly, I want us to see that the definition of Torah is what? What does the word Torah mean?
Instruction.
Instruction. Never forget that. Men change it to law. That has sometimes a negative connotation. But the very definition of Torah is instruction. Law isn't accurate. It doesn't convey the true meaning of Torah. Commandments doesn't either. Yes, there are commandments, but Torah is not a list of the commandments. If it was, we could see 613. Torah is a list of instructions that you and I need to live safe and blessed.
Right.
You know, when I began to take my children hunting, I would give them instruction.
Right.
On how to keep a weapon unloaded till you get to where you're going, on how to keep a weapon always, loaded or not loaded, pointed away, pointed in a safe direction. Never just point that thing around anywhere. I taught them, if we're going to hunt up in this tree, you're going to harness yourself to that tree. And I really emphasize that one.
Yeah.
Don't ever let me catch you in a tree without the harness on you.
Yeah.
Why? Was I trying to make their life miserable?
No, sir.
Trying to keep them safe
Right.
and blessed.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's exactly what Yahweh does. He does it. He's given us instruction meant to keep us safe and blessed.
Right.
Listen to this instruction. Hear, O Israel, verse 4, Yahweh our Elohim is one. Yahweh. Now, I would put that in the category of information. Yahweh our Elohim is one. You need this information. Here it is. It's essential information if you're going to live the blessed life. You've got to know that piece of information. Those who do not know who their Elohim is cannot live a blessed life.
Right.
Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim. And then it says, He is one. Do you know what that means? A better way to understand it might be to read it like this. Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh our Elohim, is by Himself Yahweh. Or Yahweh our Elohim is alone. Yahweh. That's vital information. There's not another Elohim out there.
That's right.
He is alone. He is by Himself. There is no other. And everything you need to know about Him, He will reveal it to you.
Right.
It's written in Torah. You don't need any man-made commandments. You don't need any man-made traditions. You don't need any man-made holidays. Everything about Him, He will share it with you. There's not another. He is by Himself. So we start with this vital information. Yahweh our Elohim is one. That's what Torah does. So when I call it information, don't think I'm not saying it's... Don't think that I'm saying it's not instruction, or that it's not a commandment, or that it's not law. We have in our day and time professors. We have teachers. What do we sometimes also call them? Sometimes they'll be referred to as instructors.
Right.
Well, how do instructors instruct? Instructors are supposed to instruct by giving information.
Right.
Truthful information.
Right.
Instructors bring students in. Instructors are supposed to be those who went and found truthful information and dispensed it to their class to their benefit, to aid and help them become whatever it is they're going to become or do, right?
Right.
That's what instructors do. They dispense information. Well, that's what Torah is, and that's what Torah does. It is Yahweh being the instructor. Torah is the instruction. And it contains information that is vital to us walking the blessed life.
Right.
So am I commanded to know Yahweh is one? It's not so much a command, you shall know this. It's information. And if you want to call it a law, that's fine. Rambam, I don't have a problem with you calling it a law. That's fine. But I see it as information that's vital as I move forward. That if I'm going to have a hard time if I don't first understand there's only one Elohim.
Right.
I've got to understand that first. We need to know who the Elohim is that created us and created all things. It is Yahweh. Now look in verse 6. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom. Excuse me, I'm in Deuteronomy 4. Look in Deuteronomy 4 for just a minute. Because we're talking about information. This is vital right here. Deuteronomy 4:6. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. We shall hear of all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Yahweh said, you want to be wise? I'm giving you information that nobody else has. Yahweh is, a theological term it's used is He's omniscient. What does that mean? Knows everything. Yahweh said, I know everything. I created you, and I created the earth you live in. I know everything about you and everything about it. Right. And if there's anybody that can tell you how to live blessed in it, it's me. Right. So if you'll listen to me and you'll do what I'm telling you to, those around you will say, my word, where'd they get all that wisdom? Yeah. Right. They'll be amazed. How did y'all come up with all of this? Yeah. Y'all are not near as educated as we are. Oh, we're far more educated than you are. Isn't that what happened with Solomon? He asked for wisdom. Yahweh said, oh yeah, I'll give it to you. And gave him wisdom. And then all those that came around him were amazed by his wisdom. Yahweh wants to do the same thing for us. All right. We're back to Deuteronomy 30 now. Look in verse 5. Excuse me. Deuteronomy 6. Isn't that where we are? Deuteronomy 6 verse 5. You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Well, now that sounds more like a command. You shall do this. Yep. You shall love Yahweh with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Well, again, it's according to where you put the inflection. We're told it's the greatest commandment, but it could come across as a commandment. You shall love Yahweh. Or it can come across as Yahweh, your Elohim, is one. And He's given you all of these things in this instruction to bless you. You'll do them and keep them, and you shall love Yahweh. That's right. The deeper you get into this, the more you see how righteous these things are, the more in love you're going to fall with Him. Right. The Moedim are not a task, are they? No. The more we do the Moedim, the more I fall in love with Him. Right? You shall love Him. Look the word love up. You shall love Yahweh your Elohim. It's not a special word for love. Same word that's used when it said that Jacob loved venison. Right? It's not a special word for love. The point is that our Elohim is special. It's not a special love we have for Him. The point is He is special and He deserves all of the love we have. All of our heart, all of our mind, all of our might. It's the greatest command. It is the command of the highest importance. But it's not the only command. It's the greatest one. Messiah said it was. Right. It's the greatest in the sense that if there are 613, and this is one of them, and you learn all 612 and do them, but don't understand this one, it was for naught. Right. The intent is not to just make us obedient. The intent is to build a relationship. Yes, sir. It's all about relationship. Here's more information, verse 6. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart. So again, I ask you, is this a command? Again, I think we read it and think it is a command to make sure, put those words in your heart. Make sure you study them and meditate on them and memorize them and learn them. But it doesn't say that. Right? It doesn't say, "In these words which I command you this day, you shall memorize. These words which I command you this day, you shall put in your heart." Now the next verse says we're going to teach them, but this verse just says they shall be in your heart. That word translated, the Hebrew word translated shall be, is the Hebrew word hayah, H-A-Y-A-H. And you know, hayah is the Hebrew word in Genesis 1. And Yahweh said, "Light, hayah, light be." Right? So here, verse 6 says, they shall be. They hayah in your heart. What if Moses is saying here, the words that I'm commanding you are not strange to you?
Yeah.
They're in your DNA. They're in your heart. What if Moses is saying in this verse, the words that I'm commanding you, they be in your heart? In other words, you're going to recognize it. When I start telling you what Yahweh told me to tell you, you're going to recognize it because it's already deep down on the inside of you.
Yes.
Your inward man delights after the law of Yahweh. You know what I'm about to tell you. You will know it to be truth when you hear it. The instructor gives instruction that comes with information. We're going to talk about verses 7, 8, and 9 later. We're going to close with just finishing up there in verse 6. How many laws have we talked about then this morning? It's not really the purpose.
Yeah.
The purpose is to discover the information that our spirit delights in, not to number them,
Right.
but to discover the information that our instructor gave us, that our inward man delights in. For I delight after the instruction of Yahweh in my inward man. So this is going to be a fun journey.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be fun. We're going to read them and we're going to see how delightful they are, how wise they are, how reasonable and easy they are, how deep they are, how simple they are. Our inward man is going to say, yes, that bears witness with me. Yes, I knew that's what I should be doing. Yes, I knew I shouldn't do that. That's what our inward man's going to do.
Amen.
And we got to just make sure that our flesh doesn't get in the way of that.
Right. Wow. Right.
Stand up.
Amen.
Thank you to all of those who also joined us by Facebook this morning. The word goes forth. Thank you for being here. We're going to delight our inward man.
Yes, sir.
Week after week after week. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He bless you. Have a great afternoon. Next week, we're at the Browns. See you there next Sabbath. You're dismissed.